How long has bro been in there? Did he have to stay still in the shadows as Klein took a shit? Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Art and Recap. I'm your artist Faye, and today we are reading chapter 224 till 228 of Lord of the Mysteries. Chapter 224, Mystic Type Detective. Okay, so Klein entered a dream divination in a room with three random people who may or may not be dangerous, right? Of course, he made them fall asleep before he did that. In the dream, he saw a sewer with a man surrounded by a bunch of gray rats. And that man wasn't moving because maggots were crawling all over his body and rats were nibbling on his skin. And you know what? When I was writing all of this script for this video, I was actually eating a sandwich and I had to go through the notes that I took when I was reading that, and I was like, oh my god, why is this part here right now while I'm eating? Yeah, it was kind of gross. I had to pause and be like, yeah, I need to eat my sandwich first and then get back to this. Anyway, another thing of note is that the corpse was missing half of its throat. It was as if some sort of wild beast got to him. And you know what? I'm guessing a werewolf, to be honest, or at least a beyonder losing control got to Zriel, because Zriel is now dead because of all that. And I do wonder if Zriel is actually a beyonder, or if he found out something about beyonders that may or may not have, implicated him in some sort of way. Anyway, Klein decides to communicate with the soul of a different guy in the room and ask him questions like who sent you to Zriel's home and who murdered Zriel. The person answered that it was actually this guy called Meyer Salt. How do you even pronounce that name? For me, as like someone who knows German, I kind of read it as Meyer Salt, but I don't know. I'm just gonna continue saying it's Moyer Salt, okay? Okay, so this guy Moyer Salt was the one who sent him to wait for and Ian, sorry, German brain, Ian, and that he was also the one who murdered Zriel. Moyer Salt is not the guy he was, interrogating. So Moyer Salt is actually part of the Sminger gang, and Klein notes that Sminger actually means warrior in the language of Highlanders, and it made me think that the group, the Smingers, are actually beyonders, because there is a pathway that is for warriors, right? Anyways, the interrogation is done and Klein opened the window to disperse the smell of the spiritual herbs and oils that he used, and also started wiping off the places he touched. And when I read that, I was thinking, bro, Klein, why didn't you come here with gloves on already? And then, oh my god. And then a paragraph later, it says that he put his gloves on and then leaped out the window. And I'm like, Klein, you had gloves this entire time? Like, and you weren't wearing them? What? Like, you knew that you'll be touching a bunch of stuff while you're here in in Zriel's apartment, but you decided not to wear your gloves until the very end? Come on. What the hell, Klein? Anyways, Klein leapt out of the window, but before he did wander around the streets, he actually did some sort of thing with the window. Like, he used his tarot card to kind of close it and make sure that it seems like nobody actually went in through the window, so that he doesn't get suspected that somebody was inside the house with those three goons. Anyway, so he started wandering around the street so that he can lose anyone that might follow him. He stopped at some point when he noticed that eyes were following him and thought that a living corpse was lurking around, because when he turned around, he saw this person that's like almost dead. But when he used his spirit vision and was like getting ready to defend himself, it turned out that the person was actually a living person, and there were a bunch of them. They were just, homeless people that were very depressed because of their circumstances. And Klein wondered what they were doing there until a police officer approached them and angrily told them to move away because they're not supposed to sleep on the streets. Klein was then reminded of that time that he just, woke up from the dead a couple days ago, actually. Right, that was only a couple days ago for him. And he took a rest on the bench and was chased away by a police officer back in Tingen. Then he went on to one of the small apartments that he rented and slept there for 2 hours before he took out a dowsing rod to find Cyril's corpse. Then Klein went into the sewer, which is, yuck, and found Cyril's corpse. And he looks at it and thinks that if Ian was correct, then Cyril only died a couple days ago. So he might actually find something out from his spirit, like his spirit is still slightly attached to him. So he divines just that. However, he wasn't able to channel Cyril's spirit, which meant that a Beyonder actually dealt with it before him. So Klein decides not to get involved any further since his job was technically already done, and because it's not his circus, not his monkeys, not his problem, right? So I'm pretty sure though that he's gonna get involved in this mess somehow because Ian still owes him 3 favors. Chapter 225, Unnoticeable Guidance. Okay, so Klein climbs out of the sewer and goes back to his tiny apartment to clean up and change out of his disguise. Oh, I forgot to mention in the previous chapter, but he was in disguise this whole time. So he goes back to that apartment to clean up, and then he heads over to his fancier apartment that also doubles as his detective office back at Minsk Street, and then he sleeps until dawn. And you know what? He probably would have slept longer if it wasn't for the doorbell ringing. And when he opens the door, he already knew that it was actually Ian thanks to his clown premonition ability, and he lets the teenager in. So, you know what? If I were Klein, I'd be so fucking pissed as hell to be woken up at the break of dawn. And you know what? I'm just gonna continue sleeping in and let the guy ring the doorbell over and over again, no matter how many times he wants. I'm not gonna move from my bed because, come on, at the break of dawn, you know that Klein should still be sleeping because he's a normal person, right? I know that he hired him as a detective, but even detectives need to sleep. Anyway, aside from the notepad that Klein plans to put in front of his door for future clients to write whenever they're coming back for a visit, he should also put a note somewhere that states his opening hours and when his lunch break is, because goddamn, you also need your breaks, Klein. I know, I would know. I also tell myself I need my breaks, but I feel like lately I'm taking way too many breaks because I am art blocked and I feel like I don't know what I'm doing anymore. So I am slowly getting back into the things that I do, like getting back into my whole schedule and stuff like that. I'm trying to balance work and life here, guys. It's kind of hard. Anyway, Ian asked Klein if there was any progress, not really expecting anything because he was really shocked when Klein said yes. And when I was reading that, I was like, you freaking brat. Like, if you weren't expecting any progress at all, then why the fuck did you bother to come here? Like, it's been a day since you hired Klein. Of course, there shouldn't be any progress, but you still went ahead and came for a visit in the ass crack of dawn. What the fuck? If I were Klein, I'd be so fucking pissed. I'd be like, get out, get out. Klein tells him that Cyril is actually already dead and that he found his corpse. Ian then asks him if Klein can take him to the man's body, and Klein's like, yeah, no problem. By the way, don't mention this shit to the police. And Ian was understanding of that fact because he knew that the police and the detectives, they don't really get along with each other, especially if it's like private detectives and they're small, like Klein. The more famous one, they are, they get along kind of well with the police, but the detectives are generally more discriminated against by the police in Backland. Klein then changed into more worn out clothes that he wouldn't mind getting dirty and went on to find a remote sewer with Ian. Once they were knee-deep into sewage water, Ian asked Klein how he found Cyril. Klein said it's cause he was trained in techniques that includes investigation, tracking, interrogation, and you know what? He's not even lying. The way he said it is so vague, you can come up with your own conclusions. Any normal person wouldn't think that he was talking about the type of training that he got under the Nighthawks. So, they find Cyril's corpse, and Klein notes that he's missing an arm and half of his ribs, and when I read it, I was like, ain't no way some rats would have done that, right? They cannot do something like that. And Klein also came to the same conclusion in the next paragraph. Ian, who was not used to seeing such a gruesome sight, vomited at the corpse's appearance, and you know what I just realized? This was probably not the first time Ian went around trudging in the sewers, because he didn't really react to the fact that they're down there. Like, he didn't say, oh god, it stinks down here. But the corpse, that was a first time. Anyway, Klein helps him out with the quillax oil that he prepared beforehand, and I think it was something that Freya told him about, if I remember correctly, since Freya dealt with a lot of corpses as a corpse collector. Ian thanks him for the oil, the quillax oil, and then he confirms that this is indeed Detective's real, and Klein tells him his condolences and suggests that he call the police. Then Klein tells him that this is the end of his mission. Ian asks him what favors he wanted out of him, and Klein says that he can only think of one thing at the moment. Klein wanted to know where he can get a gun and bullets without a permit, which, makes sense since he wants to hunt people down, level up his sequence pathways, and possibly also kill, Inse Sangwil, right? So Klein asks him that. Ian tells him where to find such a place and that he should find a guy named Kasper Kalinin. And once he finds that guy, he should tell him that the old geezer introduced Klein to him. And Klein nods and was like, alright, I'll see you whenever I need the next favor. The two of them split up, but Klein turned around, retraced his steps before hiding in a secluded corner to peek at the entrance of the sewer. A couple minutes later, Ian returns and goes back into the sewers. Klein wonders if there's something that he missed from the corpse, but decided that his curiosity was sufficiently satisfied and left for real this time. We move on to a richer part of Backlund where we find Viscount Glaint hosting Sio, Force, and Audrey for some tea. Audrey hands over the reward to Sio and Force for investigating Chilancos. There was this moment where Shio wanted to be polite, but her hand was faster than her mouth, so she grabbed the envelope before she could say anything. She compliments Audrey for her generosity as she checks the money, and she realizes that it's a lot more than what she and Force were owed, and she was like, what? Audrey tells her there's a total of £800 inside the envelope, and that they can split it however they wanted. Audrey also apologizes for putting them in danger, and Shio was thinking to herself, God damn, I'd put myself into any danger for this amount of money. Thanks to Audrey, she can divide it into her savings and still have enough to buy the formula for the sheriff potion. Viscount Glaint chimes in that he can also give substantial payment if they find him the formula for the apothecary potion. Sio tells him they'll do their best to find it for him before she turned over to Audrey to tell her that they have come into contact with someone who might be part of the psychology alchemist, and they'll soon have clues about the spectator potion that she's looking for. Audrey then smiles and says that she's looking forward to it, even though in her mind she's thinking that she's already sequence 8 and technically a higher rank than Sio. They all started gossiping about the Beyonder circles while they're looking through Viscount Glaint's bookshelves like Audrey, and Force and Sio, they found 2 books that are interesting to them and they asked Viscount if they can borrow it. Viscount Glaint was like, sure, knock yourselves out. And Audrey smiles because everything is going according to her keikaku. That night, Sio was alone on the sofa and reading the book she borrowed. After a while, she noticed something odd about the back cover. Turns out that there was an ancient piece of paper hidden inside that had Roselle's special symbols in it. She thought that Viscount Glaint's ancestors deciphered some of the symbols since there was ancient Hermes written on the side, so she mutters what was written on it, and it was the fool's epitaph. Chapter 226, The Terrified Shio. Okay, Klein was chilling and looking at the newspaper when he felt the calling of someone mentioning his name. He's like, who the fuck could it be? Is it one of the members, or is it some random clerk at the Backlund Bank trying to copy my passcode? So he rushed to the Grey Fog area to see who was bothering his reading time, since he finally found an invention he was interested in investing in. He opens up the connection and saw a petite young woman in a knight's trainee uniform, and he's like, okay, she's not trying to steal my money. I'm guessing she's one of the ladies Miss Justice mentioned. Klein decided not to respond to her for now and went back to the real world to chill. Meanwhile, Sio finally realized what she was reading and was sweating buckets because she thought she might have gotten the attention of an evil god or devil. She was wondering how she could be so stupid as to speak the words out loud, and you know what, I'm actually wondering that too. It made me think that perhaps the spectator pathway has some sort of manipulation ability like the sealed artifact that manipulated Klein in Volume 1. After all, spectators are supposed to be puppeteering everybody in the background, right? It sounds exactly like what that sealed artifact could do. And now that Audrey is a sequence 8, I think that it's highly possible that she has some sort of manipulation powers now. Seo waited and waited. When nothing happened, she went to the bathroom to splash her face with some cold water to calm herself down. As she looks up, she sees a figure in the mirror with curly brown hair, and instincts took over as she elbowed the entity in the gut. And you know what? Force wheezed in pain, and Shia was like, "Oh my god, girl, when did you get back?" And Force was like, "What the fuck just now? Why the fuck did you have to hit me so hard?" Turns out Force used the bathroom window to get inside the apartment instead of using the door like a normal person because she can travel through portals or something, right? And you know what, girl? Same. If I could have the ability to do that, I would also just, do it. I'd use the portals or whatever power Force has. So then Force asks Sia why she's so jittery, and Shio confessed that she made the mistake, and she told her, "Hey, I actually kind of recited this god's name may or may not have gotten his attention." And Force assures her that since nothing happened yet, that she'd be fine. Still, Shio asked if they can sleep together tonight, and you know what? Good for you, lesbians. We also find out that Force hears strange murmurs whenever there's a full moon, and I'm wondering if she's a mutant like what Mr. Asic explained in the previous volume when he was discussing Captain Dune with Klein. The girls were also debating if they should stay at the cathedral for the night, either the Evernight Goddesses or the God of Steam and Machinery's church, because they believe in those. Like, Seal believes in the god of steam and machinery, and Force is for the Evernight Goddess. But then they looked at each other and was like, nah, they don't want the Nighthawks and the Machinery Hive Man to target them in the end, because again, they are stray beyonders. Anyway, that night, Klein pulled Shio into the Grey Fog world and showed a glimpse of himself hiding in the fog. Sia woke up in a cold sweat and thought that she definitely fucked up because of the vivid dream she just saw. She made it her mission to not only buy her potion formula at the next Beyonder gathering, but to also find someone who is good at exorcising evil spirits to purify herself. Chapter 227, Inventor Leopard. Okay, so the next day, Klein was eating breakfast of wheat soaked in milk. He's thinking about all the food he'd like to eat and how he can improve his meals in this world, cause ain't no way a Chinese man will be satisfied with plain old toast and coffee for breakfast. And you know what? That's fair, because I saw the type of breakfast you can get at a street food vendor on Xiaohongshu, okay? But you know what? If you actually spent several years in Europe as an Asian, you start to get used to their food. This is me speaking from experience, okay? Because I stayed in the Philippines for 1 month last year to spend time with my extended family, and you know what I missed the most? Freaking German bread with slices of ham and Gruyere or Appenzeller cheese. Oh god, it's so good, that combination. And I ate it almost every single day for like 3 months or something when I returned back to Switzerland. Nothing really beats good German and Swiss bread for me, except maybe, baguettes. I really like baguettes. Yeah. What's your favorite type of bread, guys? Tell me. Mine is actually semeli and maybe also Maisbrötchen. I really like that with the tiny pieces of raisins inside. And yeah. Anyway, moving on from bread talk. Klein was planning his day when a knock disturbed his thoughts. He's like, the fuck are they knocking on my door instead of using the freaking doorbell? He opens it and sees a tall man. It's the man that actually chased Ian, at the train station and also happens to be Detective Zriel's killer. It was Moyer Salt. Klein politely asks him what the fuck he wants, and Marisol tells him he wants to hire Klein to find someone. Klein then invites him inside to talk about business, but he's like, there's no need, I'll stay here, we can talk outside by your front door, right? Marisol tells him that he wants to find Ian Wright, and Klein tries to dance around that information because he's like really it's really important for him to keep the people private. But Marisol insists on Klein ratting Ian out. He first offers £10, then 30, then 50 for the info. Klein tells him no, cause again, he has a strict client confidentiality principle, so he did hesitate a little when he heard the price go up to £50 because, our man is a little bit poor at the moment. Marisol stares him down until he decided to leave, and Klein is like, sus, they already know Ian had contacted me. Anyway, Klein isn't scared of him because he fought something far more terrifying, the transformed Migos and also her unborn demon spawn. Like, yeah, if you ever saw Migos in her final form, you wouldn't be terrified of someone like Marisol, okay? Klein flips a coin to see if he should go out or not, and the coin said to leave and touch grass, so he went out to visit the dude he wanted to invest in. He visits the inventor called Leopard, who's investing who's not he Leopard is not investing. What am I saying? Leopard is the one who's inventing a transportation vehicle that Klein is interested in. His house was an absolute mess, and he seemed like a very flighty character because before he even offered Klein tea, the dude was like, hey, how much money you want to invest in me? And Klein is like, well, dude, I don't know exactly what I'm investing in, so I'd like to see it before I promise anything. I'm doing my own research and all that. Lepard then tells him that he needs to sign an NDA before he shows Klein anything, which makes sense. So after doing the paperwork, he showed Klein a very, very odd car. It's basically a car powered by people. Lepard said it's like a bicycle, but in the shape of a car, is what I'm imagining it that. Lepard said he invented it based on Roselle's imagination, but that it's kind of heavy for people to be powering. Klein was like, damn, Roselle, you're really not letting anyone else take credit for anything, huh? Klein then asked Lepard why he's not using steam power to use as a driving force, and the inventor said that there's already people who invented those. But it has a huge body, so it's hard to navigate the streets. So Klein asks why doesn't he invent something simpler and tries to steer him into inventing a bike. But apparently bicycles have been invented in this world already thanks to Roselle, though the inventions aren't very practical. All I can think of are that the bikes back in the Victorian era that have these huge freaking wheels at the front and tiny ones at the back. And you know what? I actually had to Google if those bikes were truly invented in the Victorian era, and they were actually. And I found out that they're called penny farthing. Like, why would you call it that? The part then wonders who would even buy bikes, and Klein was like, well, the postman or any working class people with savings or businessmen who don't care for looks so they can save money. Basically, their target audience are the middle class. The bird was like, oh, that sounds good. Actually, I can try if I got the money. Klein tells him he'll invest 100 gold pounds. He was also thinking of asking 10% of the shares, but really he wanted 15%. But before Klein could offer that, Lepard chimes in and says that he'll give Klein 35%, but that's only limited to the concept Klein described. Klein is very happy with that, and they made a contract with each other. Klein said he'll have a lawyer make a formal one, and Lepard was like, alright, that's no problem. That out of the way, Klein went back to his apartment at Minsk Street and went straight to the bathroom to resolve his bloated stomach problem. In short, he took a shit. And you know what? It's probably because Klein ate that bread dipped in milk. There's a high chance that Klein is actually lactose intolerant. And you know what? We actually do need a lot more people in fiction who are lactose intolerant. We don't have enough representation. Anyway, he was washing his hands when he got a premonition. There was a pair of eyes looking at him from behind. Chapter 228, The Mastermind. Klein rolled sideways right as an arrow stabbed into the wash basin. The arrow was glowing slightly, so Klein knew that some beyonder shenanigans was about to happen. Marisol stepped out of the shadow and attacked Klein. They had a kerfuffle where Klein kept dodging the man until they somehow ended up outside the bathroom. It really only stopped when Klein grabbed one of the contract templates that got scattered during the fight and strengthened it so that it's super sharp like his tarot cards. He used it to slice Marisol's neck and watched as the man slowly died from the wound. Once the guy was dead, Klein looks over at the damage his furniture suffered and joked to himself that there's no way to claim reimbursement for that. And while Klein was joking about that, I couldn't help but think that Marisol was lurking in Klein's bathroom this whole goddamn time. Like, what? How long has bro been in there? Did he have to stay still in the shadows as Klein took a shit? Did he wait till Klein finished just to be polite? Is Cuttlefish aware that this is what his writing was implying with all of that? Anyways, Klein decided to do a divination to find out who sent more salt. It was some random middle-aged man with brown hair, blue eyes, thin face, and a stubble. Overall, Klein describes him as a good-looking gentleman. He orders more salt to bring Ian to him, dead or alive, though if he's bringing a corpse, he'd prefer if he died within an hour. And Marisol called this guy Mr. Ambassador. And Klein was like, "Ow, shit, politics." Because of the order that guy made, Klein came to the conclusion that he's actually a Beyonder or has someone employed as a Beyonder. Klein tried to divine why Ian, was being targeted, but the guy only told Marisol not to ask questions. He also found out that he provided Marisol the potion and money to become a high-ranking person in the Sminger gang. And Klein was like, well, no wonder the guy was so powerful and fast. He's a Beyonder. Because Klein was really having trouble fighting Marisol within these shenanigans earlier. And you know, Klein is a sequence 8 already. He shouldn't have trouble against someone like Marisol unless they are a Beyonder, which makes sense, right? Anyways, Klein ended the mediumship and looks over at Marisol's corpse and finds that the wound on his throat was slowly congealing. And I was like, oh damn, is he actually healing himself? Because again, he's a Beyonder. But now apparently he's dropping some loot. Klein was thinking that he should determine Marisol's Beyonder characteristics in the Grey Fog world and if it can be useful at all, because he dropped this jelly-like object that Klein was like, oh, this is probably something that will be useful to advance his Beyonder, not Klein's, Marisol's Beyonder pathway, right? He was also wondering what the fuck he should be doing with the corpse. And that's a good question, because someone else will definitely be sent over to Klein to investigate why Marisol was gone. So it seems like Klein is now involved with the local mafia. And that was Lord of the Mysteries chapter 224 till 228. What did you guys think of this episode? As you guys can see, I am still a little bit art blocked, so we're still using game footage. I hope that's still fine. And also, I'm hoping to bounce off more. My webcomic is going to be launching soon, so I also need to draw the cover because I still have the old ones, and yeah, it needs an update. Okay, so maybe next week I actually have artwork again. Anyways, before I go, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. It helps my channel out a lot. My commissions are open and my Vision link is down in the description below. Check out my webcomic Dreaming of Aurora if you have the time. And finally, thanks to my patrons Robek, Vanarik, and Javalitska for the support. I'll see you guys next time. Bye!